Tales of Sintra is a bit of a head scratcher because given what you get, the price doesn't quite make sense to me. Today we're looking at a game that attempts to blend a dark, unique narrative with interactive VR gameplay. If nothing else, it was developed from a creative headspace. This is Amalgam VR, and I spent $20 on this game, but you should watch this before you do the same. Let's dive into this review of Tales of Sintra: The Dark Vortex. Let's start with the theme, and this one has a story that might leave you with more questions than answers. In a nutshell, the story revolves around a plague-like darkness that only a group of peacekeepers called the Sintrans know about. This darkness created a vortex inside of an unexplored dungeon that won't stop absorbing life until it consumes all life on Earth. As the player, you've been training your whole life for a mission like this, and you've been tasked with feeding something called Vega to this vortex. Vega is a crystal-like thing that's absorbed the life of thousands of Sintrans and concentrated starlight over hundreds of years. The Sintrans are hoping Vega will overload the vortex, and I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like a very bad idea to me. This story is creative, which I'm sure we can all appreciate, but the story would have probably been an easier pill to swallow if it wasn't thrown at you in a 7-minute long speech before you even dive into the game. The speech itself kind of backfires because it makes certain plot holes very noticeable, like why are they only sending one person, you, on such an important mission with so many unknowns, and why do they think this vortex will stop at absorbing life on Earth? What's to stop it from absorbing all life everywhere? In general, you'll get a theme filled with dark secrets and questionable unknowns. Now, whether you find it acceptable or confusing will depend on how much you actually care about the story. If you don't care about the story, I'm sure you'll care about giving this video a like to support a small channel. You guys are awesome, and you also care about gameplay, so let's talk about the mechanics next. Now, combat in this game has a very low skill floor. You can literally wiggle your sword like a toothpick and boom, enemies fall over dead. This even worked on the boss, which blew my mind. If I'm being honest, the word combat is loosely defined for this title. Now, between my play sessions, this game had a major update. They added new physics and animations that felt as natural as a fish riding a bicycle. It's crazy because this update was supposed to make combat, in their own words, more challenging and fun. Despite this update, the combat still felt like an afterthought, but with extra steps. It feels like the developers were aiming to make this game equal parts combat and puzzle solving, but it felt more like a 70-30 split, leaning more towards fighting. Because there's so much combat, the problems around it are a bit obvious. Imagine you're about to enter Mortal Kombat. You reach for your sword only to accidentally pull out nothing. Yeah, that's right, because this game also likes to test your spatial awareness and memory. There is no noticeable calibration system, so when you start the game, your shoulder weapon slot, which is also your primary weapon slot, is never in the same place twice. Sometimes it's a little above your head, sometimes it's right next to your head, and sometimes it's kind of in your shoulder, but either way it doesn't work as intended. I could go on about the other problems like the bow mechanics feeling lackluster or the weapon roulette from weapons sharing the same slot, but I think I made my point, so let's move on to the next category. Alright, let's switch gears and talk about the visual quality of this game. It's not the absolute worst you'll see in VR, but let's just say it won't be winning any awards. One cool feature that caught my attention are these eerie hands that emerge from the ground to swallow up the creatures you defeat. This dungeon is alive, and this is a neat representation of that. This creepy yet interesting detail is a nice touch, offering a brief moment of uniqueness in a place where you expect unexpected things to happen. The environment itself is a miss though. Take the walls for example. They have textures that move independently of one another, creating a subtle, unsettling effect that's much more noticeable in the headset than in this clip. It's a detail that could be argued as a feature of this living dungeon if it didn't feel so unintentionally eerie. Speaking of textures, let's talk about the aesthetics in general here. Aside from the blue-eyed zombies, which immediately reminded me of the Draugr from Skyrim, the rest of the textures in this game are difficult to swallow. That's to say the visuals in this game are pretty rough around the edges from an expectation standpoint. You would assume a simple fix for this would be upping the graphics in the settings, but we'll talk about why that won't work later. For now, let's dive into Immersion. Given what we've gone over so far, it's easy to imagine that this game just isn't very immersive. Just moving around this dungeon leaves much to be desired. The movement feels unintentionally sluggish, as if you're ankle deep in maple syrup. If there's a sprint function somewhere, it's a well-kept secret because I have yet to find it, and I guess it's kind of immersive when you think about it as forgetting something on the other side of your living space. 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to sprint to get it. Usually there's more in terms of immersion, but the problems with mechanics and the other categories we'll talk about in a second really hurt the experience. So let's move on to audio quality. Now, immersion in VR is a delicate dance of sensory inputs and user interaction. It's all about building an environment that convinces you you're in a different reality. This game attempts to do just that with audio. Every so often you'll hear these loud, random growls, clearly designed to send shivers down your spine. The intention here is to craft an auditory experience that's not just eerie, but concerning. Unfortunately, it feels a bit too staged. Not unlike those haunted houses where someone jumps out at you, actually. It's more startling than genuinely frightening, tipping the scales from immersive to intrusive. It doesn't help that these sounds are often very loud and disjointed with no way of turning them down. That's right, no in-game sound settings in 2024. More details on that soon, but aside from the music, there isn't much in the way of sound here. Early on in the tutorial section, the only audio you get is footsteps, crackling campfires, and the sound of your sword clanking against things. The narration in the very beginning isn't bad though. In fact, it's actually quite good. It occasionally sounds off, but I'm pretty sure it's due to the way the script was written rather than the voice actors themselves.
The more light it absorbs, the stronger and more solid the shadows will be.
It's too bad there isn't more voice acting though, especially with it being one of the better aspects of this game. In many VR experiences, fine-tuning settings to fit your personal comfort needs is crucial. Unfortunately, Tales of Sintra dropped the ball on this one. As mentioned earlier, there's no height calibration option available. This means it's either happening automatically or, more worryingly, it's not happening at all. This can potentially lead to everything from navigating environments to interacting with objects feel less natural and immersive by misaligning players with their equipment slots and the environment. Adding to the pile, and also as mentioned earlier, this game does not offer any in-game audio settings. This is a big miss because controlling audio levels is not just a matter of preference, but of comfort. Too loud and the game can become a jarring, headache-inducing experience, and man, this game gets loud. Graphics are another missed opportunity here because, you guessed it, without in-game adjustable graphical settings, you will be limited in your visual experience. This lack of customization, especially for a game like this, will lead to a dampened experience, which is just unacceptable in the 2024 VR landscape. Big misses aside, this game does have multi-language support. It also has bow aim assist, which shouldn't really be a toggleable option since without it the bow is essentially unusable. You can also adjust different aspects of movement like turning speeds. And hey, you can choose between toggle and hold for your weapons in addition to choosing which shoulder slot your primary weapon goes. All in all, we're missing a lot of settings, but we have most of the basics. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the scoreboard and see how Tales of Sintra stacks up in 2024. Theme gets a 3 out of 6. This game has a unique story with a sense of creativity and originality. While the plot holes made obvious from the get-go definitely affected this category, I'd say the theme is still average for a 2024 release. Mechanics gets a 1 out of 6. This game's mechanics suffer from significant quality control issues, notably the bizarre weapon slot placement and uninspired combat. Immersion gets a 1 out of 6. Despite noticeable efforts in building a good atmosphere, Immersion is heavily compromised by different gameplay elements like the visuals, audio, and mechanics. Motion aids gets a 2 out of 6 because this game simply lacks essential motion aids such as adjustable audio and graphical settings. For a 2024 release, it's just unacceptable to have zero way of adjusting these in-game. Their bare minimums are mostly accounted for though, keeping this score from bottoming out. Visual quality gets a 2 out of 6. While this game doesn't hit the lowest marks in visual quality thanks to some creative effects, the graphics are underwhelming. The textures are poor and hard to redeem with missing adjustable settings. And audio quality gets a 2 out of 6 for that same reason. The audio in this game aims for a dire atmosphere with growling sounds that are supposed to be intimidating. Unfortunately, these come off as too forced, detracting from a genuinely eerie experience. All of this adds up to an overall score of 1.5 out of 6. A title like this in 2024 for $20 regardless of intention, low-key comes off as predatory. I cannot recommend this game in its current state, but here's to hoping some major improvements are made to a game that feels like it should still be in alpha testing mode. As usual, thank you so much for watching and showing your support. Don't forget to like this video if I saved you $1 and subscribe so you don't miss out on future VR content coming your way weekly. Until next time, stay immersed.